That section 110 of the Constitution is clear. As my good friend would say, it is pellucidly clear. Section 1110, which speaks to revenue allocation, reads, and I've read it before and I need to read it again. Subsection 1 reads, subject to subsection 2. The proceeds of all taxes collected in St. Christopher and Nevis under any law shall be shared between the government and the administration, and the share of each shall be determined by reference to the proportion between the population of the island of St. Christopher and the population of St. Christopher and Nevis as a whole, as the case may be. The population of the island of Nevis and the population of St. Christopher and Nevis as a whole, as ascertained to the latest available results of a census of those populations carried out in pursuance of a law enacted by the Parliament. Section 2. The share of the administration under subsection 1 shall be subject to the following deductions. A contribution to the cost of common services provided for St. Christopher and Nevis by the government, and B, a contribution to the cost of meeting the debt charges for which the government is responsible under Section 75. The Governor General, it continues, may make rules. The Governor General may make rules for the purpose of giving effect to the provision of this section, and without prejudice to generality of the foregoing power, any such rules may make provision A, for describing or for prescribing, beg your pardon, what services are to be regarded as common services, B, for determining the contributions to be made by the administration in relation to any common service so prescribed, and C, for determining the contributions to be made by the administration in respect of the debt charges which the government, or for which the government is responsible, and D, for prescribing the time at which and the manner in which calculations and payments, including provisional payments, are to be made. And finally, the powers of the Governor General under subsection 3 shall be exercised by him or her on the advice of the Prime Minister, but no such advice shall be given without the concurrence of the Premier. So if that does not give us a great point of departure to ensure there is fairness, what can? What other legislative framework is required? We do have it before us, the supreme law. The Prime Minister's actions will therefore have to speak louder than his words. So when he gets to the top issues that deal with the matters of the Constitution, as he did say, he has to deal with tough issues that deals with the matter of the Constitution as well. Let me repeat what he said.
To hammer out the tough issues of CBI revenues, the tough issues that deal with aspects of the Constitution that really need to be dealt with so that we can have a better relationship, so that these matters, they don't raise their head again. And I've said, I know they had what you call a Charlestown Accord, but then we see that, people weren't, respecting it, saying that it's not worth anything. So anything we do has to be done in a legislative framework that would have the strength to survive. And therefore, that is how I think we have to move. But I'm committed to resolving these issues. And where there are inequities, or where there any sense of mistreatment and not be given a fair share, we have to deal with those type of issues. So we have to deal with it fairly so that St. Kitts feels satisfied and Nevis feels satisfied.
I really like the approach of the Prime Minister. If we are going to be talking about equitability, that's a word. And as I said before, I repeat, the Prime Minister's actions will have to speak louder than his words, however. So when he gets to the tough issues that deals with the matters of the Constitution, he must examine. Nevis, for example, gained home rule under the Independence Constitution in 1983. They run their show in Nevis. They call it autonomy. And if there is going to be equality of opportunity for all, then the legislative framework must be considered to give St. Kitts home rule as well. You must give St. Kitts some autonomy as well. That's the tough issues that have to be dealt with. It's more easily said than done. If you ask me, I do not believe it can be done right now. But it is something that has to be considered if we're going to talk about fair share for St. Kitts or equity for all, fairness for St. Kitts and fairness for Nevis. The architects of our 1983 Constitution, we must agree, did what was politically convenient to the Simmons administration. Yes, the architects of the 1983 Constitution dealt with political expedience. They did what was politically convenient to the Simmons administration back then in 1983. Well, Prime Minister Drew, you have a Himalayan task, and I implore you, you can shape your legacy by attempting to do what is morally right. And this can only redound to the benefit of ensuring the strong bonds between St. Kitts and Nevis. Do not deal with political expedience. Deal with what is morally right. And you will find out in time, and your legacy will dictate that you have made certain that there would be strong bonds between St. Kitts and Nevis. And that's my story for tonight. And I'm not going to change it. Because my Straight Dog family, I believe that equity is equity. When we look at it, whether we like it or not, the elections gone by in August, or on August the 5th, 2022, and all the elections gone by since 1983, independence, are really elections to select a government for St. Kitts. And herein lies the problem. We must accept it. Do not bury our heads in the sand. Every time there's a budget session in the federal parliament, it is a budget to run the government of St. Kitts. There's nothing in there for Nevis except for budgetary support. 46 million, I think it was, or 45 million. So how can we continue this way if we are going to ensure the strong bonds between St. Kitts and Nevis? And my family, I know that I in recent times I've had to adapt, and you may find that I'm talking quite a lot. I'm talking quite a lot because I still have not restored my radio feed, and some of my people are not hearing. But I can guarantee you that we will sort that out sooner rather than later. Never mind, I want you to share the feed on Facebook and or YouTube If you have your friend and you have a smartphone or a smart TV, share the program with your friend, your neighbor, your mother, your sister, or your daughter. And you can access the program. You still can access the program at 646-829-6672 and 869-663-6672. So the marshals and my good friends who are listening, I'm not going to really open the lines, or rather I should say I've opened the lines for you to intervene anytime. If you feel like calling, just pick up your phone and call. Just ensure that you be fair to all concerned. Just ensure that the things you say will be beneficial to all concerned, and just ensure that the things we say and do, or rather in the process of saying and doing those things, will be beneficial to all concerned. And let's go back to the lines. Caller, you are live. Hello, caller. Are you there, caller?
Hello?
Yes, you're live.
Hello?
Yes, you're live, sir.
Hello?
Yes, you're live. We're hearing you live and clear.
Hello?
Yes, you're
I think you're hearing me, but I'm not hearing you. Hello?
I'm hearing your caller. Go ahead.
Again.
Okay, we seem to have lost that caller. I don't know what's the issue there. Seem to have lost that caller. But caller, I'm hearing you loud and clear though. Don't know what's the issue. Yes. Yes, caller, you're live. Hello, caller.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you loud. Go ahead, caller. I'm hearing you.
Ambassador, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you, caller. I'm hearing you loud and clear.
Yes, I'm hearing you, caller. I'm hearing you loud and clear.
Go ahead, caller. I'm hearing you loud and clear. Okay, I seem to be having some difficulty there with that telephone line. When things expect to go good, they don't at times, but let's see what we can do to sort out that telephone line. But yes, my Straight Up family, you can access the program, like I said. You can access the program, like I said, at 646-829-6672 and or 663-6672 is the local number as well. I was hearing that caller, but that caller is not hearing me for whatever reason. But I can implore you to try again. So yes, my Straight Up family, if you're joining me for the first time, we are looking for the bonds. Yes, caller, you're live. Yes, caller, you're live. Yes, turn your equipment down. I can hear you live. Hello, caller? Yes, I'm hearing you loud and clear, sir.
Ambassador,
Your humble servant.
I think we know each other.
Voice sounds familiar.
As far as yes. My name is Anthony Ron.
Judge Queen's Counsel. How are you, sir?
Well, I am doing well. The thing is, right now, I believe between the current federal government with 6 seats and the CCM with 3 seats, they've got 9. And I believe that if both sides would start looking at the Constitution, the areas where they've got a common view on reform, it could be very helpful. I've heard mention of the unity agreement. I've heard mention of the Charleston Accord. Those documents exist. I think that they should be made public. And elements, and both of them refer to constitution reform, they refer to boundaries. Because if you are going to continue working with what was put together in 1983 as the Constitution, is going to result in a lot of arbitrary decisions, things that you cannot foresee, and is akin to trying to keep water uphill with a rake. Theoretically possible, but only theoretical. You go back and you look at the Constitution of 1983, and there were a lot of things wrong about it. But you have to start with where you are. Between 1983 and now, each political party could be, if they want to cooperate, can provide a list of all the changes they would like to see. And if those are collated, I've got no doubt that you'll find in excess of 85% are in the same camp. So I'm saying that the facilities are available if there is the political will. Thank you.
Well, before you go, Council, you mentioned the Constitution of 83, right? In terms of the as I mentioned, the home rule for Nevis, shouldn't there be home rule for St. Kitts as well?
That is something that could be seriously considered, and that's why I am saying the same rules that apply to somebody who is going into school at the first time, 5 or 6 years old. When you reach 15 or 16, there are also rules, but not necessarily the same rules. 1 or 2 of them might still apply. For instance, you go to school and you respect your teachers and so on. But rather than go through and sort of do a condemnation, a total condemnation on the Constitution provision, you start by recognizing you are where you are, and you sit and determine what you want as far as the future is concerned. And I am saying here, if you look at the unity agreement, and you also look at the Charleston Accord, I am persuaded, I am convinced that Dr. Drew could find stuff in there, particularly if you just look at constitution reform, because most of the queries that I've heard and most of the complaints, speaking about Nevis, speaking about spaceship, speaking about all of those things, you run the risk of passing legislation that's inconsistent with your constitution. And you're just spending a lot of time spinning wheels and going to court, rather than people sitting down and the same way that they could hatch what turned out to be this currently unworkable constitution, some thought can pretty well craft a proper way forward. Now, I don't want to stay on this call unnecessarily long, because you got other people going to be calling it.
No, what I need to get, since I have you though, one more question, because the Prime Minister been speaking a lot about legislative framework in terms of this fair share, but isn't there an existing legislative framework in the form of a constitution that speaks to allocations? Do we need something else new?
Yes, but it has created so many problems. I mean, you just look around the Commonwealth. You look around any place. For instance, you look at the United States as for instance. How many amendments have they had to their constitution? Okay? You look at Canada. Canada had an 1800s constitution. They came up with one in the 1900s. The constitution is not a dead document. It is supposed to be a live document, and as we advance, we've got to amend the constitution accordingly. For instance, when the constitution, that 1983 constitution was set up, how many people had cell phones? How many people had the internet? And I'm saying we are at a stage now where we have to go back and revisit. As a matter of fact, I can suggest to you, Ambassador, that when you were a little guy growing up, which might not be very long ago, you could remember 3 stones and a coal pot for cooking.
Yeah.
Now, you walk around St. Kitts and find any place, we're going to find 3 stones and a coal pot for cooking. I bet most of the people living in St. Kitts and Nevis never heard of a Dover pot. Okay? Never heard of a clay pot that you've got to put oil in it and boil that oil for a long time in order to get the pot ready to be able to cook. So don't go back and say, let's go back and spend so much time on that, on what happened in 1983. In most of my years in North America, I wound up working for a lot of indigenous people. And they had some frameworks which were put in place in, I don't know whether 1850 to 1872 or whatever. And one of them required that Indians had a special capacity for hunting and fishing as usual. What as usual meant then is different to what it means now. Anyway, you've got my views.
Thank you very much for that thought-provoking intervention. Thanks a lot for your input tonight, Queen's Counsel. And you
all the best.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, my dear brother. All the best to you as well. Thank you. He did say that the Constitution is not a dead document. I think those were his words. Right? It's a live document, and it can be amended. But I'm always of the view, I don't know if I am right, that one of the most difficult documents to amend is the Constitution, because of the threshold required, especially certain areas in terms of the 2/3 majority. There's some straightforward action that can be implemented in terms of amendment that may need just a simple majority. But you did make a point, though. Okay, let's go back to the lines. Call you live. Hello.
Yeah, the God cut off. Situation being difficult. It's impossible. And I think, go back again and look at President Kennedy and the redress. Things are difficult, but let us begin. We're not gonna start at the end point. We're gonna start where we are, and with a plan, we can reach where we want to be. And I'm now gonna say goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to have disconnected you inadvertently. I'm just sorry for that. But yes, you did mention, the caller mentioned, you have 6 plus 3 is 9, because you need that 2/3 majority to make certain amendments. Look at the term limits, for example, that we took to Parliament some years ago, and we did not have that 2/3 majority because you wanted a vote from the opposition back then, and we did not get that vote. But yes, the Independence Constitution of 1983, as I said before, and I say again respectfully, that the architects of this Constitution at the time produced a document that was that created political convenience, or that was politically convenient to the then Simmons administration. And I submit that Prime Minister Drew can shape his legacy by attempting to do what is morally right for St. Kitts and Nevis and move away from the political expediency. Because, as I said, whether we like it or not, whether we believe it or not, every December, on the basis of the Constitution, the NIA, as I said, has been given its autonomy. It can rule. It can pass its own legislation. Nevis has gained home rule, as I said, under the Independence Constitution in 1983. So the NIA would go to the Nevis Island Assembly and approve its budget for Nevis. When we come to the Federal Assembly, the St. Kitts government approves a budget for St. Kitts. It is a budget for St. Kitts. It has absolutely nothing to do with Nevis. All the capital projects, all the capital expenditure is for St. Kitts. So herein lies the problem, if it is really a problem. But my family, if you have just joined me, you are listening to Straight Talk if you just happen to bump into the program. And for those who may have just joined me, we are looking at what I call the strong bonds between St. Kitts and Nevis. And there are strong bonds. Our family bonds in particular. And my family, I can hear you say, many of you, my mother was born in Nevis, or my grandmother was born in Nevis, my grandfather was born in Nevis. Or I hear you say, my father was born in Cotton Ground, Nevis, and my mother was born in Old Road. Or I can hear you say, my father was born in Brown Hill, and my mother was born in Cairn. Or you can say like me, I am a Nevis man born in St. Kitts. Because there's no Liburds that came from St. Kitts. Liburds are Nevisians. So I claim that right as a Nevisian born in St. Kitts. But the truth is that, and I recall as well, I can reflect on the days when we had vacation. You heard that caller speak about clay pots and so on, but on the days when we had vacation in our time growing up, we never had the wherewithal to go to the United States or to Canada for vacation. We in fact went to Nevis for vacation. That's our vacation. We go over to Nevis, and the visitors will come down to St. Kitts. And that's where the bonds remained, or how the bonds remain strong. But the strong bonds between St. Kitts and Nevis have to be protected. And as I said from the beginning, Princeton University Professor Robert George opined that freedom can be taken away, but it can also be given away out of sheer ignorance. And that has always been and will always be my mantra as I continue to serve my people and my country. I remain very strong in the view that there is a need for civil society, because history has taught us that new or amended political leadership is hardly more democratic than their predecessors. I want to repeat that. History has taught us that new or amended political leadership is hardly more democratic than their predecessors. And I also submit that our new administration of a few weeks old will have to contend with the greatest political problem of our federation, which is the relationship between St. Kitts and Nevis. But notwithstanding that fact, without fear of being contradicted, or without fear of contradiction, I think it is said, there still remain, and I believe there will continue to be, strong bonds between St. Kitts and Nevis. St. Kitts and Nevis were inhabited by Caribbean Indians, irrespective of what you read about Columbus. But Columbus on his voyage in 1493, I think it was, landed on St. Kitts and named it after St. Christopher, his patron saint. Many people ask, how did we get St. Kitts? I think it was the English that shortened our name St. Christopher to St. Kitts. Columbus also claimed on his second voyage that he discovered Nevis. And he called it Nevis because of its resemblance of or to a snow-capped mountain, described in Spanish as Nuestra Señora de las Nieves, or Our Lady of the Snows. St. Kitts and Nevis served as a first colony in the Caribbean. Yes, the first. And as such, we serve as a base for further colonization in the region. Our islands of St. Christopher and Nevis were British. We were British since the 17th century. And we were always administered separately. When the attempt or the proposal was made to bring St. Kitts and Nevis together, way back in 1867, to unite or amalgamate the administration of both islands, there was strong opposition back then. But 140 years after, Nevis got its own administration since 1882. Because in 1871, St. Kitts and Nevis became presidencies within the federal colony of the Liburd Islands. And Anguilla was appended to St. Kitts as a dependency in 1871. And in 1882, the Leeward Islands legislature passed laws that brought or merged the two administrations and formed a combined presidency of St. Kitts and Nevis. The name of the colony changed in 1951 to St. Kitts, Nevis, and Anguilla. But the Leeward Islands colony was then disbanded as a result of frequent tension between the members of the Leeward Islands associations. Now, it was from 1958 to 62 when St. Kitts, Nevis and Anguilla formed the province of the West Indies Federation. We had 2 members elected to the House of Representatives and also having 2 senators appointed by the Governor General. Bradshaw, remember, served as the Minister of Finance within the West Indies Federation setup. And we got associated status in 1967. For those who have just joined us, I'm repeating this. And was granted full internal autonomy, that is St. Kitts, Nevis and Anguilla, as an associated state of the United Kingdom. Remember, Robert Bradshaw, the history books will tell us, was sworn in as the first chief minister after the elections in 1966. And on the 27th of February 1967, Bradshaw became the first premier of the associated state of St. Kitts, Nevis and Anguilla. But the granting of statehood opened the door to secession. Nevis were grumbling, so too was Anguilla. And it was in 1967, you've heard of the overthrow of the Bradshaw, or the attempted coup, it is referred to as well, an attempted overthrow of the Bradshaw regime. It started in Anguilla when the leaders of Anguilla expelled the police from the island, and it declared its independence in 1967 as the Republic of Anguilla. It was later called the Anguilla Revolution, and Ronald Webster went on record to say this.
For our people of Anguilla, it was from a natural instinct led by the power of God. Anguilla Revolution responded to oppression. It demanded sacrifice so that the generations of our people could live with dignity and self-respect. Our 1967 revolution created opportunities for all Anguillians. If Anguilla did not take that political stand in 1967 against St. Kitts government, our people would never have been given to make a decision, to vote in an election, not to determine their own destinies. We must always remember that Anguillians are the heirs of the 1967 revolution, and we should respect and accept this privilege. Doors are opening that were not open before, and we're hopeful that our people will enter those doors as they open.
We must remember our history, my Straight Talk family. And that was Ronald Webster, the Anguillan leader. The Nevis Reformation Party, the NRP, was founded in 1970. And I believe it was founded out of the Christina disaster. And credit must be given to Premier, the first Premier and national hero of Nevis, Dr. Simeon Daniel.
Historians say Winston Churchill. Someday, someone may very well say, if there were no Christina disaster, there would have been no Dr. Simeon Daniel. For you see, out of that disaster came the formation of the Nevis Reformation Party. That party of peace, progress and prosperity, and its first leader was Dr. Simeon Daniel. Historians say, if there were no Second World War, there would have been no Winston Churchill. Someday, someone may very well say, if there were no Christina disaster, there would have been no Dr. Simeon Daniel. For you see, out of that disaster came the formation of the Nevis Reformation Party. That party of peace, progress and prosperity, and its first leader was Dr. Simeon Daniel.
Yes, the Nevis Reformation Party, founded out of the Christina disaster in August 1970, the Christina disaster. But the NRP was founded in 1970 and started campaigning for secession, for independence from St. Kitts, and dominated the Nevis Island Council from 1971. 1971, the NRP dominated the local council in Nevis.
Sometimes they had a budget of less than $200,000 to spend per year. They never got the full sum of money, and usually it was not released until December, at the very end of the year. They could not possibly spend that money in 1 year, in 1 month. Therefore, Nevis was plagued with bad roads, a poor water system, an ancient telephone system, and a temperamental electricity supply which barely extended beyond the boundaries of Charlestown.
Said an ancient telephone system. But the NRP first contested the national elections, now called the federal elections, in 1971. They won a single seat in 71, which they lost in 1975. But in 1980, when the more in a premature way, in his attempt to avoid calling the parliament and affording Kennedy Simmons his rightful place in the assembly, he decided to call the elections, and it was after the 1980 elections, the NRP won 2 seats and coalesced or became a part of the People's Action Movement-led coalition government. And that was our first coalition government in the Federation. And that brought quite a lot of improvement for Nevis. And according to former Premier Joseph Parry, he likened it to the true revolution in Nevis, which began in 1980 when Nevis got its first government since 1982. Since 1882, beg your pardon. Remember, there were two administrations, believe it or not. St. Kitts had its own administration in 1882, and so too Nevis, until both administrations were amalgamated by the British. So Nevis didn't get its own government until 140 years after, when they coalesced with PAM after the 1983 independence.
And with a fickle British government, these men persevered until 1980, when a coalition between the People's Action Movement and the Nevis Reformation Party was formed. Then, and only then, the true revolution in Nevis began. 1980 to 83 was a frantic period of preparation for independence, so that when the 19th of September 1983 dawned, Nevis was ready for its first government since 1882. A premier, better paid, with ministers of government and a cabinet with real power to make decisions on behalf of the people of Nevis for the development of the country, and a House of Assembly to make laws.
And yes, my straight dog family, under the Constitution, our present Constitution, Nevis has been given considerable autonomy, with an island assembly, a premier, and a deputy governor general passes his own laws. It can also, under specified conditions, secede from St. Kitts or from the Federation or the federal government of St. Kitts and Nevis. And it was attempted before. But fortunately, it did not. I say fortunately, because we belong together. It did not meet the required constitutional threshold, as secession requires approval by 2/3 of the Assembly's 5 elected members and by 2/3 of voters in a referendum. The NRP blocked the bill of secession that was tabled, ironically, by Vance Amory's CCM. But Vance Amory as premier called for elections for 24th February 1997. Those elections produced no change in the composition of the Assembly. And Premier Amory, may his soul rest in peace, he pledged to continue his efforts towards Nevis's independence. And in August 1998, a referendum on the question of independence for Nevis failed. And thank God, Nevis presently remains within the Federation. We are still together as St. Kitts and Nevis, one federation with 2 islands, one lovely paradise. We are still together because of the strong bonds between St. Kitts and Nevis. But fast forward to 2015, with the advent of the tri-party coalition, the united group which the people of St. Kitts and Nevis called for. And many felt that it was the best thing that ever happened to St. Kitts and Nevis. It was the best relationship ever in St. Kitts and Nevis.
We have come 4 years after we were elected to serve at the federal level, to report and, of course, to take your questions and get your feedback. To report on what has happened, what has transpired in the past 4 years, and where we feel that we have made some successes, and I'm sure you will remind us of our failures as well. You have most of the cabinet of the federal government here seated, and they have come, and they clearly have come over from St. Kitts, and their very presence here is an indication of the first point I want to make, which is that the relationship between St. Kitts and Nevis has never been better. It is the best that it has been in the history of this country. And as someone who is in the middle of it, both from the Nevis end as Premier and sitting in the federal cabinet, I can tell you that there has been a genuine effort to meet the needs of all the people of the country and to provide in a way that all the people of the country can benefit. And I think that that, more than anything else, is to me of tremendous significance.
And yes, my Straight Talk family, the entire federation, the whole country welcome this new fundamental way of ensuring good governance. The entire country welcome this new paradigm of good governance.
History, sometimes very unfortunate. Those of you who work for the government in Nevis will well remember that Wednesday when your checks were bounced to Nevis. That was not just a function of the NIA having financial difficulty. That was a direct consequence of a bad relationship between St. Kitts and Nevis, of decisions being made in Church Street calculated to hurt the people of Nevis. And I am very proud to say that through this team unity arrangement, that has not happened again. We have ushered into being this new paradigm of governance, which has ensured that it will never happen again. These are the things which to me matter. These are the things which ultimately speak to whether or not we've achieved that which we promised, and that is to usher into being a better relationship between the islands of St. Kitts and the Nevis. And that is why I hold no water in my mouth when I say it is the best that it has ever been in the history of this country.
Let's go to the live. Yes, caller, you're live?
Patrice.
Yes, you're live.
Patrice.
Yes, I'm hearing you live, my brother. Hello?
Hello.
Yes, you're live, caller. Go ahead.
Hello. I can't number there. Straight number call. Call the number.
Yes, yes, caller, you're live.
TV. Straight talk.
Yes, you're live.
Hello.
Caller.
Hello.
Yes, you're live.
What's life? Whole life, man?
Life is peaceful. How is your life?
My life, who in the main? Who you really voting for?
Election's gone.
I know. Who you vote for?
Election's gone. Vote is coming up.
Who you vote for?
Change the things you can and accept the things you can't change. Let's move on.
Yes, move on, but move on is right.
Yeah.
Get a good life.
Right.
Good night.
Have a good night, my brother. Yes, my Straight Dog family. Someone was asking who I voted for. But that's so obvious. You know, that has to be treated as I treated it. And yes, my Straight Dog family, the evidence of this great relationship, what would you consider the evidence of this great relationship between St. Kitts and Nevis?
Relationship is better. I believe the evidence is on full display here this evening. Just today, the federal cabinet met in Nevis. That may seem to some purely symbolic, but it is important symbolism, because for these men and women to have journeyed over, the full cabinet was there, from St. Kitts to meet as a federal cabinet in Nevis. This wasn't a joint cabinet meeting. This was the federal cabinet choosing to meet on the island of Nevis and to have its deliberations here. And it was an historic day, because we met and received the report from the Marijuana Commission, the National Commission, and the Prime Minister in due course, I'm sure, will update the public on that. But the fact that that happened, and it happened here in Nevis, is symbolic in my view of the relationship that has been developed and that is now on full display.
And yes, my Stray Dog family, when we look at it, some things went wrong, and we can all agree. And in the process of doing that post-mortem, we have come to the conclusion that change is unavoidable. We can also agree that change, we ought to accept, to change the things we can and accept the things we cannot change. But truth be told, it took a team unity administration. It took a new philosophy. It took a new vision of empowerment across the political divide to bring Nevis into a genuine federal relation. Something that was proposed way back in 1882 and 140 years ago. So the bonds between St. Kitts and Nevis must be strong. I say to you that there is a new political dispensation in St. Kitts and Nevis. There is new political leadership that has come into office. And one of the first commitments of the new Prime Minister, for which he must be commended, is to sit, he said, and hammer out the tough issues.
A way to hammer out the tough issues of CBI revenues, the tough issues that deal with aspects of the Constitution that really need to be dealt with so that we can have a better relationship, so that these matters, they don't raise their head again. And I've said, I know they had what you call a Charlestown Accord, but then we see that, people weren't, respecting it, saying that it's not worth anything. So anything we do has to be done in a legislative framework that would have the strength to survive. And therefore, that is how I think we have to move. But I'm committed to resolving these issues. And where there are inequities, or where there any sense of mistreatment and not be given a fair share, we have to deal with those type of issues. So we have to deal with it fairly so that St. Kitts feels satisfied and Nevis feels satisfied.
And I agree, wholeheartedly agree. For the strong bonds between St. Kitts and Nevis can only get stronger if the issues are dealt with and dealt with fairly. We must do everything within a legislative framework and in a way that St. Kitts feels satisfied and Nevis feels satisfied. And whatever the decisions, they must not be shrouded in secrecy, or they must not be left in the dark. As I said before, and I'll say again, Mr. Dave, my position is absolutely, it is pellucidly, it is clear. Tax or non-tax, revenue is revenue, irrespective of the economic classification. And the Constitution, which is the supreme law, provides the legal framework, or to use the terms of the Prime Minister, the legislative framework. The Constitution provides that framework to advance the equitable allocation of revenue between St. Kitts and Nevis. Prime Minister Drew discussed, we are told, the relationship between both administrations, the NIA and the federal government. Yes, we are told that discussions were held on how the relationships can be improved to deliver even more for the people of the Federation. But the Prime Minister must make no mistake and offer no patronage, but he must be guided by the Constitution and Section 1110, which is pellucidly clear. And for those who may have just joined me, and for those who may not have heard it before, Section 110 of our Constitution speaks to revenue allocation. That's the legislative framework. That's the legal framework. We need not look nowhere else, or we need not look elsewhere, because it says the proceeds of all taxes collected in St. Christopher and Nevis under any law shall be shared between the government and the administration, and the share of each shall be determined by reference to the proportion between the population of the island of St. Christopher and Nevis and the population of St. Christopher and the Nevis, and the population, beg pardon, of the island of Nevis and the population of St. Christopher and Nevis as a whole, as ascertained by reference to the latest available results of a census of those populations carried out in pursuance of a law enacted by Parliament. And my Stray Dog family, constitutional reform, as my colleague has just said, is the only answer. How do we get that constitutional reform? It's not as easily done as said. But what I can say as we wind down tonight's programming, the Prime Minister's actions will have to speak louder than his words, however. Because when he gets to the tough issues, he has to act in a tough manner. The tough issues that deal with matters of the Constitution. And as intimated earlier, there ought to be constitutional reform if we are going to change things. How do we reform the Constitution? It's not as easily said as done. You need that 2/3 majority. As I said before, Nevis gained home rule under the Independence Constitution in 1983. Do you believe that the current crop of politicians or political leaders have the political will to reform our Constitution? These are some of the questions we'll have to ask ourselves. Because it takes coming together in the best interest of the Federation to get this constitutional reform and ensure that everything is equitable, everything is fair as we move forward in this country. Nevis, as I said, gained home rule under the Independence Constitution in 1983. And if there's going to be equality of opportunity for all, then the legislative framework must be considered to give St. Kitts home rule as well. This has to be done if, as I said, there's going to be equality for St. Kitts and equality for Nevis. How are we going to do this? It can be done in so many ways. How do we map the process to constitutional reform? Someone wrote, and I'll read it. As a start, strike a Constitution Review Committee to report back to government within a specified time. And therein starts the bureaucracy. But it is a start. Do you believe that we should start with a Constitutional Review Committee to report back to government within a specified time? Should that Constitutional Review Committee be clothed with independence? Or should we have representation from all parties in the country? The mechanics can be worked out quite, or the modalities can be worked out quite easily. But this is a suggestion coming forward. But my family, things ought to be done if we are going to have equality for Nevis and equality for St. Kitts. Because the architects of our 1983 Constitution, as I said before, and I'll repeat it several times, and perhaps more times before I leave, the architects of our 1983 Constitution did what was politically convenient to the incumbent administration back then, the Simmons administration. It was all about political expedience or political expediency. So Prime Minister Drew, shape your legacy by attempting to do what is morally right. And this can only redound to the benefit of ensuring the strong bonds between St. Kitts and Nevis if we are going to move forward and just stop this revolving door. My family, there are many different views on the issues I've raised. Different views on the issues I've raised tonight. And that's what Straight Talk is all about. Straight Talk is about diverse views. But we have to exactly, contrary to what some may opine. If you do not know where you came from, Emmanuel, you cannot know where you're going. And while we're not going to drive the car in the rearview mirror, the fact is you have to establish where you are if you are going to determine where you're going. It's not about crying over spilled milk, my brother. It's about analyzing and determining where you are, and to establish that, you must first know where you came from. And once you have established where you came from and established where you are, then you will determine where you are going and how you will get there. And my family, we look tonight at the issues of our bonds between St. Kitts and Nevis. Many of you have sent me messages as relates to the current issues in St. Kitts and Nevis. The issues of the Bastille High School and other issues, the issues of the VAT and other issues. I've decided I will not deal with them at this point in time. Perhaps, just perhaps, next week I'll deal with those. But I wanted to, as I said from the onset, to consider the strong bonds between our beautiful islands of St. Kitts and Nevis. And we do have strong bonds. And for those, again, as I wind down tonight, for those of you who seem to be upset, let me stress that every citizen, including you if you are a citizen, every citizen is free to exercise his or her democratic right to speak to the issues that affect him or her, or that affect his or her country. The Constitution guarantees freedom of expression. Free speech is an entitlement. But I would admit it does come with responsibility. Freedom of expression comes with responsibility. You have to be responsible for what is contained in your free speech. You have to be responsible for its veracity, its accuracy, and you have to be responsible for the intent, and the list goes on and on. But we are all called to lead by example. In relation to the issues as it relates as well to the allocation of revenue in or between St. Kitts and Nevis. The World Bank, I'm informed, were contacted to do a comprehensive study of the revenue sharing arrangements between St. Kitts and Nevis. It is important that the country is apprised of whatever report that the World Bank consultants would provide to the Ministry of Finance. It must as well be guided, or guide us rather, in terms of the budgetary allocations for St. Kitts and Nevis. And as I said before, any revenue sharing arrangement between St. Kitts and Nevis must be, underline, must be subject to Section 110, Section 110 of the St. Christopher and Nevis Constitution, which takes into account A, the deductions of the costs of common services, and B, the contributions, the cost of meeting the debt charges for which the government is responsible under Section 15. Some of us would like to hear that, but the Constitution is the supreme law, and we all must be guided by such. Section 110 is the legislative framework. Make no mistake, Prime Minister. Make no mistake, Prime Minister Joe, and offer no patronage. You must be guided by the Constitution. You must be guided by Section 110. It is clear. You need not look nowhere. You need not look elsewhere, because the Constitution is straightforward, plain and simple for everybody to understand. So, I support you, Prime Minister. Legislative framework is important.
Hammer out the tough issues of CBI revenues, the tough issues that deal with aspects of the Constitution that really need to be dealt with, so that we can have a better relationship, so that these matters, they don't raise their head again. And I've said, I know they had what you call a Charlestown Accord, but then we see that, people weren't, respecting it, saying that it's not worth anything. So anything we do has to be done in a legislative framework that would have the strength to survive. And therefore, that is how I think we have to move. But I'm committed to resolving these issues. And where there are inequities, or where there are any sense of mistreatment and not be given a fair share, we have to deal with those type of issues. So we have to deal with it fairly, so that St. Kitts feels satisfied and Nevis feels satisfied.
Charleston Accord, Prime Minister, was between three parties. Interestingly enough, the people have put those parties on the opposition benches. The people obviously knew why. The people made that determination, and only the people know why. For the strong bonds between St. Kitts and Nevis, they can only get stronger when the issues are dealt with fairly. I agree with you, Prime Minister. I agree that we must do everything within the legislative framework and in a way that St. Kitts and Nevis feel satisfied. My brother. Yes, calling you live. Hello. Okay, we seem to have lost the caller. Yes, we seem to have lost the caller. Everything must be done within the legislative framework, and in a way that St. Kitts feels satisfied and Nevis feels satisfied as well. And as I said before, and I will close in this way, it must not be shrouded in secrecy. The country must know. The actions of the Prime Minister will have to speak louder than his words when he gets to the top issues that deals with the matters of the Constitution. And as I wind down, I will end as I started, with the words from Professor Robert George, who said, and I quote, "Freedom can be taken away, but it can also be given away out of sheer ignorance." And that has always been and will continue to be my mantra as your host of Straight Talk. And I continue to serve my people over the years and years to come. I will remain strong, very strong in the view that there is a need for a strong civil society, because history has taught us that new or mended political leadership is hardly more democratic than their predecessors. There's one problem that has emerged since the August 5th general elections, and we will have to contend with that problem. I consider it the greatest problem of our federation, which is the relationship between St. Kitts and Nevis. Notwithstanding that fact, I believe that there are strong bonds between us both. So my Straight Talk family, I end this way as I started. It can only redound to our benefit if we ensure that there are strong bonds between St. Kitts and Nevis. That's my story tonight, and I'm not going to change it. My time is done, and I'm going to run. But until we connect on Monday, beg your pardon, have yourselves a wonderful weekend. Be good to all whom you meet. And remember in the process that whatever your mind conceive, that you will achieve. But first of all, you must believe. So when you wake in the morning, thank God for the morning light. Thank Him for taking you through the night. And my Straight Talk family, keep moving on. Bye-bye. Until we connect on Monday.